This is Fit to Succeed in partnership with NordicFitnessEducation.com with host Ben Pratt. Thanks for joining us.
A trainer needs 20 to 30 clients. Name me one other business on the planet where you need 20 to 30 good customers. You don't need a huge online following for that. You don't need anything other than to figure out who it is that you are, what's that 1% that's unique about you, who else shares that 1% with you, where are they already, what communities do they already exist in.
Hello listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Fit to Succeed show. We welcome to the podcast today Jon Goodman. He is a respected personal trainer, an industry veteran, so to speak. He is also the founder of the Personal Trainer Development Center and also runs something called the Online Trainer Academy. Jon, welcome to the show today.
I thought I was an industry veteran until you told me about your history, Eric. I am a baby compared to you, man. I'm looking forward to learning from you.
Oh, great stuff. It's going to be a fun conversation. Now, Jon, you're an author of a few different books in the subject of fitness and fitness-related business. And in particular, you have a book that here in our business at Nordic Fitness Education, we utilize, and that book's called Ignite the Fire. Now, in that book, you talk a little bit about the concept of creating a niche and how important it is for trainers to have their specific niche. What is your concern, perhaps, Jon, with regards to people who try to appeal to the broader market of clientele? What's the problem with that?
So I warned you before we started this call that I wasn't going to answer your questions, but instead I was going to act like a politician and answer the question that I want to answer. So here's the thing. When you're talking about a niche for a trainer, there's something that needs to be kept in mind. A lot of in-person trainers, local trainers, benefit from something called location bias. Effectively, a client, a prospect, really won't travel more than 20 minutes to go to a gym. I mean, there are exceptions, but like reality of it is. And so in most markets, I'm not talking about like New York City or London, in most markets, there are only one or a few gyms within 20 minutes of every client. So client finds their way through Prochaska's model of change. They're finally at the action stage. They've gone through all of the debates with themselves of whether they want to do this thing or not. They want to do this thing. They go to a gym. It's scary for them. And you happen to be there, basically. So a lot of the time with an in-person trainer, to be honest, the first couple clients are the benefit of just catching a lucky break, putting yourself in the position to catch lucky breaks. In addition, I think a big mistake that a lot of trainers make when they start off is they try to niche themselves too quick. The reality of it is, until you've seen a whole bunch of clients, you really have no idea who you want to work with. Like I wanted to work with athletes and celebrities. I worked with athletes and celebrities, and it was a miserable experience. And so I decided then to work with, reasonably affluent clientele who had chronic low back pain, because that's what I found that I was interested in after training like 1,000 hours. And so I say this all, and I'm going to give a second part to this answer, but I say this all to make the simple point that at the beginning of your career, you have one goal in mind, which is to work with as many bodies as you could possibly work with. That needs to be the priority. Now, of course, you got to pay your bills, but when choosing where to work and how to work, I honestly think the priority should be, will this job allow me to get in front of as many bodies as possible and work with as wide variety of people as I could possibly work with so that I can figure out who I want to work with?
Yeah, that's good advice. Start off with getting experience. And to do that, of course, like you said, you need to work with lots and lots of clients. And if you work with those clients, you start to get a sense of which ones you enjoy working with that might indicate to you what a specialist niche could be. Is that what you're saying?
That's more or less what I'm saying. And so the second part of that question is, yeah, great, that sounds good, Jon, but how do I get in front of those clients? So you work for a big box gym that has lots of people going to the door and a massive marketing budget, even though they might not treat you as well. But it's a matter of saying, okay, this is my priority at this period of time. Now, when you go online, which is a lot of the work that we do now is we help trainers transition to online training, you don't benefit from that location bias anymore. And so at that point, identifying what we call your 1% uniqueness factor, which is actually much deeper than a niche. It's actually 3 levels down. I think a niche is like the first level. We teach a framework that's 3 levels down. You've got to target super specifically because now you don't benefit of location bias. Now you're competing with that guy in Germany and that girl in Finland and that other dude in Canada.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so how do you possibly differentiate yourself to get started? Once you get rolling and once you get people results and have referral popping in, well, then a niche matters a lot less simply because people are coming to you because they trust you, because they recommend it to you, and you have the background results. But to get going, you have one major competitive advantage over everybody else on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
One.
What's that?
And that advantage, Eric, is that there's only one of you. So then it becomes really important to say, what is the 1% about me that makes me different than anybody else? That is an uncommon commonality to other people. You know, a lot of fit pros market themselves based off of the 99% that makes them the same. It's like you burn fat, you gain muscle, you work with moms, new moms, whatever it is. It's like, yeah, so do a million other trainers. Like, good luck differentiating yourself. So how deep can you go there? And that requires a really, really in-depth analysis of who you are. And usually it has nothing to do with training.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like we have one person in our community, Troy, who's one of our students, who his community is people in Chicago interested in cosplay.
In cosplay, all right.
Nothing to do with fitness. But you know what? If you're in Chicago and you're interested in cosplay, he is probably the only fitness professional marketing himself as a Chicago cosplay fitness professional expert. And as a result, you can give him your business, you know, and that's how he got started with his first 5 clients, basically overnight, that he didn't even need to sell to.
I think that one of the reasons why I asked that initial question, John, is because, as you know, when people first start in the industry, there's a fear that if they don't appeal to the widest number of people, that they might not get clientele, they might not get business. And of course, the reality is by doing that, they almost water themselves down so much that there's no reason why someone would choose you as a trainer.
And have you ever thought about how many clients you actually need? A trainer needs 20 to 30 clients. You know, 20 to 30 good customers. Name me one other business on the planet where you need 20 to 30 good customers. You don't need a huge online following for that. Mm-hmm. You don't need anything other than to figure out who it is that you are, what's that 1% that's unique about you, who else shares that 1% with you, where are they already, what communities do they already exist in, how can you diffuse into those communities seamlessly and establish yourself as the fitness expert in those communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Good advice.
Build the community yourself.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Now, let's switch gears a little bit here. One other thing that you talk about in your book is you talk about the need to be able to communicate your value to the customer.
Sure.
Why is that such an important component of effective sales?
As effective sales? A lot of trainers like talking about the things that they're interested in, not realizing that clients aren't interested in it.
True.
There's also a big difference between what's called benefits and features, right? Logic versus emotion. Mm-hmm. A lot of trainers sell sets and reps. What they're not selling is the transformation. They're selling the how. They're not selling the why. So are you selling a trainer doing a squat because it's a large, closed chain, multi-joint movement that works a lot of muscles and so creates an energy deficit that results in a larger caloric deficit because of the epoch effect?
There's the science, eh? There's the science.
Or are you selling a squat because it's going to help your client fit back into her red dress that she wore on the cruise ship with her husband 3 years ago, where she felt like every single woman was jealous of her and every single man wished that he was her husband?
Right, the dream, eh? The real dream.
What do you think is going to encourage and motivate a client to do that dang squat? Because really, your only job is to get a client to want to exercise. Mm-hmm. That's literally all you do. The reality of it is, for the majority of clients, the specifics of what you do with them is so much, is not anywhere close to as important as getting them to want to do the thing. There are probably thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different workouts that would get the client results that they are more or less happy with in a safe and effective way. Mm-hmm. For the majority of clients, we're not talking about putting people on stage here. Mm-hmm. Or putting people on podiums. For the majority of clients.
Yeah, I totally get
What
that. And
matters is whether you can get somebody to want to do that.
of course, yeah. And something else I think that complicates this process, perhaps, John, is what you actually look to charge in the first place. And I know many trainers will start by determining their value compared to other trainers rather than their value to the person. For example, you might say, right, I look at everyone else in my gym and they're charging $40, so I'm going to charge $35 because I'm new, and that's my rate. Whereas, you know, if you're going to buy a car, for example, I use this analogy a lot with my students. If you buy a car, it doesn't matter if you buy a cheap, small family car or a very high, expensive hypercar. If you get what you think is value, you'll be willing to pay for that car. And I kind of that same sort of comparison in relation to how you price yourself as a trainer. So how then do you think a trainer, if they want to be a budget trainer versus be a high-end, expensive trainer, how could they still ensure they communicate this idea of value to their customer?
Well, first of all, I'm probably going to steal that example from you because I think it was a neat one. I told you I'm going to learn something from you in this interview.
That's all good.
I'm going to learn a lot from you in this interview. The first thing to note is, as a trainer, if you think you're competing, you've already lost. I mean, there's no reason why you should ever compete with anybody. If a client comes to you or is across from you in a sales table, a sales meeting, on the phone, or whatever it is, and isn't already sold on you, you've already lost. You know, the pre-selling is that they should be approaching you saying, how do I buy, not why should I choose from you?
It's an interesting thought process.
And so, yes, sales are important to elicit appropriate attention. Sales are important to be able to sell your training and get somebody signed up for it and get them to perhaps commit bigger. But the reality of it is I view sales not as much of a conversion thing, but I view sales as a onboarding process. You know, get them bought into the specific product that you're selling them and the service you're going to offer them so that they hit the ground running versus get them to a sales meeting so you can convince them to buy. I think they should be convinced to buy before they sit in that sales meeting. So a lot of people teach like sales scripts and spin selling, and like, look, I've read all the sales books. Like, I can tell you how to sell, but I can also tell you that you shouldn't need any of that as a trainer because you're selling self-confidence, right? You're selling appearance, you're selling emotion. Like it should be the easiest thing ever to sell. It's the thing that every single person wakes up and immediately wants, which is to be fit and feel like they're attractive towards others. It's not a selling thing. Anyway, what was your question?
My question was when we've got you've got someone who's perhaps pitching themselves in a more budget market, and certainly in Europe, that's a very fast-growing market in Europe, versus somebody who's pitching themselves maybe working at a high-end club that's high-end. How do we still ensure that we're able to communicate value to those different types of extreme clientele?
Well, in a budget market, you're generally not working with people one-on-one. I mean, maybe you're doing some introductory stuff with them one-on-one, but you're generally doing more of a small group training model. Or what I teach a lot and what's become really popular is a hybrid model. I think that the best way to use technology and automation is to scale your efforts at making personal connections. Basically, you automate and use technology to eliminate everywhere that a human doesn't need to be, so that a human only needs to show up where they need to show up, which is to coach. You know, and if you actually think about what most conventional one-on-one trainers do over the course of the day, they actually do very little coaching. What I think they should do is they should do a lot more coaching. And so how do you sell that? I mean, you get people bought into it based off of this 1% uniqueness factor. You get people bought into it based off of things that largely aren't based on merit, because if you actually consider why consumers buy basically anything, this isn't just fitness, it has almost nothing to do with merit. You know, purchase decisions are largely irrational decisions. And so if you really understand purchase decisions and you understand why people buy, they buy because others are doing it. They buy because you've made the decision-making process easy for them by allowing them to feel like they can justify their purchase based off of usually one point. that doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with merit. You know, I'm going to sign up with this person because they like cosplay and they live in Chicago. Mm-hmm. That has nothing to do with how good of a trainer that person might be for you. But it's a rationalization to purchase training. Once you get the initial people signed up for that, you take better care of them than you've ever taken care of anybody. And that's where understanding that personal training, the fitness industry is customer service industry. And the better care you take of your customers and go way far and beyond. Like, I see it all. I mean, we've got communities of, we've got 2 Facebook groups of like, I think they total about 60,000 now. And people ask all the time, they're like, oh, this person asked me for free advice. Should I give it to them? I need to charge for IP. It's like, yeah, you should. And you should go way out of your way, because this is somebody that has reached out to you for some sort of help. And maybe they'll buy something from you, or maybe they won't. But if you can be that person that shows up when they need it and get them the results that they want, you think they're not going to tell the world? Mm-hmm. Like, that's how you start.
Yeah, I totally agree. I always say to my students that, you know, what we're selling is not knowledge, because the internet now makes it possible that any client, if they're interested to try and find it, can find out far more information than any one single trainer can ever know.
Absolutely.
And that's completely free. So it's not about what you know. It's about, as you said, it's a customer service industry. Absolutely.
Seth Godin calls this idea whales and minnows. And I really like that analogy. You are going to have a tiny percentage of people that are going to pay you the majority of the money. But in order to get that tiny percentage of people that are willing to pay you way more than you might think that you deserve now, if you're in this mindset of, you know, how can I charge less? You need to help a ton of people who you might not make anything for, you know, whales and minnows. So if our website reaches 4 to 6 million personal trainers a year,
wow.
How many of those do you think buy from us?
Probably a pretty small percentage, I'd imagine.
Tiny percentage. Whales and minnows.
Absolutely.
That's how it works these days.
I really like that. And I think now that you've mentioned your website, the PD Development Center, it would be great to just shift gears a bit and to focus a wee bit more on I suppose we've talked about niche, but maybe a bit more on the concept of the niche area of online training, although it's not really a niche. In our modern
opportunity, we'll call it a business opportunity.
A business opportunity, that's a good word. In our modern technologically driven society, obviously online training is a big lure, and it's really increased, I think, over the last 3 to 5 years, the number of trainers you can see operating on online platforms. How important is it, do you think, John, for a newly qualified personal trainer to offer as one of their services today online training?
They shouldn't. They're not good enough yet. I mean, and just so your listeners know where they're coming from, myself and my company has helped more trainers transition to online training than everybody else put together at this point. We've been teaching it since 2013. I created the first ever certification in it. I wrote, still to date, the only textbook on online training that exists in the world. You cannot, and I've traveled the world speaking about it, you cannot be an effective online trainer unless you have at least a year, and usually a little bit more in-person experience, for a very specific reason, and that's online training requires you to take a much more proactive and lateral approach to training. When you're in person, you can be reactive. A client says, oh, my wrist hurts when I bench press. Mm-hmm. You can feel it out. You can say, what does it feel like? Oh, try this, try that, try this. When you're training somebody online, you can't. You know, you're not there with them. You need to understand your client to a much deeper degree, and that understanding is only going to be attained through actually working with people in person a lot. For example, if you're working with a man or woman who works at a desk all the time, let's say a professional at the desk all the time, you know that exercise 2A in their program for a 3-0-1-0 tempo, 4 sets with a 1.5 minutes rest, is not going to be a bench press. It's going to be an incline neutral grip dumbbell press. Why? Well, you know, you don't really want them holding on to a barbell internally rotated pressing if they're sitting at a desk all day. You want to bring them out into a neutral grip because that's going to be easier on your shoulder and likely reduce impingement. Now, is that going to be the case for every single person? No, there's going to be some people who sit at a desk that are fine bench pressing. But you would never know that. And there's so many iterations of that concept, right? You would never be able to anticipate potential problems and laterally program around them. unless you work with a lot of people in person. So yeah, I can absolutely teach you how to build a business online if you've never trained anybody before. But I don't. We're very clear in our marketing that we don't want you to buy this. We don't want to work with you unless you have a fair amount of in-person experience under your belt, because there's nothing that we can do to teach you to do a good enough job with online clients.
I think that's very insightful, that there needs to be a base level of experience in working with people one-on-one, in real time, before you're able to have, as you suggest, that real understanding and experience that helps you to transition more effectively to an online model.
Yeah, and look, there's going to be a lot of people who either will ignore my message or have never heard my message, and are going to do online training without ever working with somebody in person because of, as you said, the alert. But you know what? It's going to be a lot of people who are going to crash and burn, because online training is not easy. It's a new business. It's a different business. And a new business requires a deeper level of understanding into that opportunity. For example, when you're assessing a client online, you need to look at reliability over validity, because it's very difficult to do technically valid tests online. How are you going to test somebody's body fat online unless they have access to a bod pod or DEXA underwater rain, which they probably don't?
Nope.
How are you going to test them online? Well, they can use a bioelectrical impedance scale, a body fat scale. Well, okay, there's a 3 to 5% error factor in there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And that's basically a useless test. So what do? You look for reliable tests. A tape measure is actually your best friend because it's reliable. Mm-hmm. And that goes across the board when you're doing assessments with online clients. Whereas in person, you can look for more valid tests. Online, you have to say to a client, well, look, whatever you did before, I want to know that data. And that's totally important. But today is your day one. Mm-hmm. Today is your baseline. And all the tests that I'm going to choose now to assess your progress over this are going to be reliable test to test so that we can measure your progress as we work together.
I think that's a really good point. And, that's one, for me, very clear difference between how you would operate as an online trainer versus a face-to-face trainer.
Absolutely.
Are there any other key things that come to your mind that are different when you're working as an online trainer versus face-to-face?
Motivational interviewing becomes much more important. Motivational interviewing is important in person as well. But face-to-face, there's a good chance that you're going to see the person and be able to understand body language a little bit more and communicate without speaking a bit more and get a bit deeper understanding of the client. Online, you don't have that advantage. So what happens? Your client stops sending their check-ins, stops responding to your emails, and doesn't show up for their scheduled call. What do? Well, that's awkward because now your lizard brain has taken over. Now you're thinking, do they hate me? Did I screw up? Did I do something to piss them off? Are they never going to sign up again? Did they stop working out? Well, maybe something came up with their life. Or maybe they went away on vacation, they didn't tell you. Or maybe they didn't get your email because the spam goblins ate it and they never got it. You have no idea. Mm-hmm. So how do you reopen that conversation in a very empathetic way with the sole purpose of reopening the conversation, not really knowing what the situation is? Maybe they're upset or maybe not. Motivational interviewing is a very, very important skill set. So of course we teach that. We have an entire chapter on that for those situations exactly, because that's something that generally you wouldn't learn working in person. You can, like Precision Nutrition is a company that teaches it really, really well. But for the most part, you wouldn't have that skill set. And then the third is just, knowing how to write. If you're training people online, you're going to write a lot. I'm not just talking about sales copy and social media posts and stuff like that for promotion. You're going to be writing emails back and forth to clients. A lot more.
Sure. And program plans and other things.
Stuff like that. You need to write clearly, succinctly. You need to avoid redundancy. You need to understand the difference between active and passive tense. These are all skill sets that are important no matter what you do, to be honest, but become much more important as you're working with people online.
Yeah,
than
it
they are.
becomes what represents you, doesn't it? Because they don't get that same level of interaction face to face to really warm to you. So like you're saying, the way you interact through communication, whether that's through email, text, some kind of online messenger or anything like that, that is who you are. And so, like you said, the way that you write has to reflect that effectively.
And recognizing the difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication. What we're doing right now is called synchronous communication. You talk, I respond. Mm-hmm. I have very little time to plan my response, right? And so it's very easy then to ask for clarifications, to paraphrase, that type of thing. You can't really do that in asynchronous. I mean, you can, but it's awkward. Whereas in asynchronous conversations, you have the advantage of actually taking as much time as you need to phrase the exact response that you get, that you want. Mm-hmm. And so you need to anticipate then exactly how that person is going to interpret it. And you need to be very clear. This is where writing becomes very important, and you need to be crafty with your writing. Like, emoticons ain't going to cut it.
Yeah.
You need to be able to be clear and make sure that there's not going to be a misconception, or your message isn't going to be misconstrued, and that you're not coming off as rude or obnoxious or impatient. You're coming off as very empathetic. That takes time, and that's a new skill to learn.
That leads me quite nicely into the next sort of point of the discussion, which is, you've talked there a lot about how to build those relationships. Mm-hmm. Now, there's also another skill that needs to be obtained for the online trainer, and that is, you talked earlier about this idea of location bias, and when you're working face-to-face with people, you've got that benefit. But as an online trainer, there isn't that benefit of trying to get clients into your local gym. You're now mm-hmm. competing against, as you said, people all across the world. So, what are the primary differences in the sales process, perhaps, or the marketing process of you as a trainer when you're trying to focus primarily on that online market?
Sure. I think what's important is to understand that there's 3 categories of potential, of prospect, we'll call them. In the textbook, I call them fast, medium, slow lane buyers. Mm-hmm. Fast lane buyer is going to be generally about 3 to 5% of the people in your network right now. Call them the low-hanging fruit. They're people that if you make the right pitch right now, their pain is great enough, they've thought about making a transformation great enough, they just need somebody to appeal to them the right way, to say, hey, come sign up, right? That's where sales copy comes in. That's where paid advertising comes in. That's the majority of what you would generally consider to be marketing or advertising. Now, the problem is that marketing and advertising get conflated. They're very different things. Advertising, for the most part, is trying to convert that fast lane buyer. People that are ready to buy now. Well, and we talk about states of awareness too, which is another important point. Like, is this person ready to buy? Is this person ready to buy and they're aware of me? Is this person ready to buy and they're aware of me, but also aware of somebody else, and they're deciding between the two of us? Is this person ready to buy and they've decided to buy from me, but they haven't bought yet? Right? All of those are different states of awareness that require different sales messages. And so when it comes to putting out a marketing message or an advertising message, we'll call it, you're basically just making a very specific pitch, calling out a very specific person. We have a script that works really, really well. I'm looking for 3 to 5 people who fit these guidelines, who are between this age, who are looking for these results, who have this challenge. If that's you, fill out this form. Mm-hmm. Right? That's all that's meant to do. And then you have the medium lane cards. These are people who are kind of aware that they want to do something at some point, but they're not quite ready to do it now, or they're looking up different options and stuff like that. And so those are the type of people where you're not selling to them right away, because you can't sell to them right away. What you really want to do is you want to become top of mind for them for as long as possible. And this is why we've developed the top of mind system. How can you create the community or create material or continue to engage these people and get as many impressions of these people as possible, so that when they're ready to buy, you're the obvious choice? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the 1% uniqueness factor, because the reality of it is the medium lane buyers are going to be about 90%, 80-90% of your total customers. And most people completely ignore. The majority of people, by the way, the majority of trainers only touch that fast lane, which is a tiny percentage. And then once they tap them out, they got nothing.
Right.
And then they're like, I don't get any clients. It's like, it's actually a ton of people potentially. You just haven't done the work. You gotta dig the well before you're thirsty. You haven't dug the well. You just like basically pulled from a puddle that already exists, and now the puddle's out.
Scrape the surface and hope that you could get great results.
Absolutely. And so that's step two. And then there's the slow lane buyers, who are the people who are just not going to buy right now, no matter what. And you're probably not going to engage them, but if they're listening, that's good. And maybe they'll convert to medium, maybe they'll convert to high. So I guess the point here is understanding that you need to communicate very differently to appeal to people in these three categories, or probably top two categories. Mm-hmm. And follow up becomes very important.
Yeah.
And follow up and follow up and follow up and follow up. Like I have people who have bought our certification and online training that have seen 6 different promotions for it over 4 years.
Right. That's interesting.
I mean, these are people who have easily spent hundreds of hours in our communities consuming our content, if not thousands. And now they're ready. And you know what? When they're ready, they ain't looking at anybody else. They don't need to read a single email. They don't need to read a single sales page.
Yeah, they already know who you are. They know what you stand for, what your business is about. It's now just a matter of it's the time for me.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because earlier this month I attended the European Health and Fitness Forum, which is a large event here in Europe with pretty much all the major players in the fitness industry. And one of the presentations, they talked about selling gym memberships online and doing that way. And they said that from all the data that they'd gathered together from this large chain, that they required a minimum of 8 contacts before somebody was ready to buy. And that kind of goes nicely with what you've said there about these medium-term buyers, these medium lane buyers who need more than just a quick sales pitch. They need time to think and to ponder and to touch base again and again before they're finally in a place where they're convinced that it's the right choice.
And so here's the most interesting part about that. They need 8 contacts that this gym chain could measure. If you count contacts that they couldn't measure, I bet you it's closer to hundreds. Mm-hmm. Because really, we fall prey to this arithmetic left brain thinking that everything that can be measured matters much more than everything that can't. You can't measure, 93% of word of mouth still happens offline. You just can't measure every single one of them, and so it's not in our face.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
But what people see across their feed, getting real things in real people's hands, creating material that folks want to get passed on, creating real results that somebody sees, going out of your way, going back to the customer service thing, sending real gifts to your clients, great gifts to your clients, handwritten codes, postcodes to your online clients that are like unique and interesting and fun, and all of those things matter so much more than any single paid advertisement that you can possibly send out trying to gather somebody's email so that you can follow up with a phone call.
I'm with you. It's that personal touch, that thoughtful touch where you've reached out, it feels like, specifically to them.
Maybe. Yeah, you're just creating impressions. You're just staying top of mind to that person. It's not anything that can measure, but it matters so much more than anything you can. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference between this long-term thinking and people that are going to win over the long term versus I have this fear that the majority of fitness professionals in 2 years are going to realize that they've wasted their time for the past 2 years because they've never actually created anything for themselves. They've built platforms on social media networks. The successful ones even have built platforms on social media networks that are largely irrelevant, or the algorithms just smash them so much that their platform is now irrelevant unless they pay huge sums of money. And they've never actually developed any assets that work for their business. Mm-hmm. They've spent all their time making stupid memes and short little dumb videos.
Mhm.
Like, there's nothing wrong with that stuff, but that stuff is gasoline on the fire. It's not the fire itself. You got to build the base and the foundation. The foundation is real assets. It's real results with real people. It's real things that you put into the real world that get passed along. It's becoming good enough at mastering your craft that you're worth talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Shout out to the world before you've attained any level of mastery. Hey, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. That's like this constant reinvention that so many people go through is exhausting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you said, so many of those influencers tend to, their profiles tend to be so focused on what they're doing. And right at the very start of this call, we said the important thing was to recognize it's not about you. It's actually about your clients. That's what you're there for. I totally get that. And if you had the opportunity, we'll kind of conclude on one last thought. If you had the opportunity to go back and speak to Jon Goodman when he has first qualified, he's entered the industry and he's excited, as you view that now, is there anything you'd do differently?
I love this question because the easiest cop-out answer that's gloriously unhelpful to everybody that listens, that you're going to hear in 99% of the time when you ask it, is there's not really anything that I would do different because, every mistake that I've made and every inefficiency that I've had has, taught me something, which has led me to where I am today. And so, I wouldn't, like, that's a horrible answer that doesn't help anybody. It's largely true. I am a big fan of failure, which develops courage. I do believe very strongly in trying something and in looking for what's called asymmetric opportunities, meaning that try to craft opportunities whereby if you win big. If you lose small, so that you can try and fail, because you're never going to win. You're never going to bat 1,000. And that failure leads to courage. I'm so confident now that I'm going to figure it out no matter what goes on, that it allows me to take risks. And that's a pretty big competitive advantage I have as I develop my business. But to give a more useful answer that your listeners can take and use, the one thing that I didn't do as early as I would have liked to is documented everything that I did. I mentioned earlier in this call, most coaches actually coach a lot less than they probably should. Mm-hmm. They spend their time doing a lot of other stuff, administrative stuff, marketing stuff, answering emails, whatever. And at the beginning of your career, it's fine. You should do those things. But as you're doing them, my recommendation is to write down everything that you do in a step-by-step fashion so that you can hand that piece of paper to somebody else and they could do that thing for you.
Right.
Because at one point, I hear all the time people like, oh, how do I find a good VA? I've hired, virtual assistant. I've hired people all the time and none of them are good enough. It's like, they probably were good enough. You just didn't do a good job in telling them what you needed them to do. And it's very difficult to hire somebody as an assistant and be like, assist, do this, do everything. But when it's time for you to bring somebody on, if you can be like, here's 10 tasks that you can easily do for me. Here's exactly how to do them.
Yeah, great point. Really.
And just hand it to them. Well, you can immediately and much quicker start the process of buying back your time at a discount, which allows you to scale your own efforts, which allows you to stick doing what you are best at, which allows you to spend more time in personal development, seeking mastery in what you're doing, and also becoming a better writer, learning more about business, learning more about training, which allows you to earn more money in different ways, either charge more, or if you don't want to charge more, that's perfectly fine, but develop other income streams. Mm-hmm. And then spend more money to hire other people to do other tasks for you that either amplify you in your message, video editors, writers, content marketers, whatever, advertisers, marketers, or people to help buy back your time. Yeah. Nannies, babysitters, house cleaners, assistants, those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's a really actionable point as well, and a great way, I think, to draw our conversation to a close, Jon. It's been a real pleasure spending some time talking to you today and just picking your brain of all those little tips and ideas that could make our listeners, better fitness professionals themselves. So I really want to express my appreciation to you for that expertise. Thank you very much,
my
Jon.
pleasure. And I told you this wasn't going to be 30 minutes.
Oh, it's great. We've had a great discussion, well worth the time. So have yourself a great day. Thanks very much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share via social media. You can also rate the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. If you'd like to know more about us, then check out our range of online courses at www.nordicfitnesseducation.com.